Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I don't have a slide presentation, but that gives you an advantage for just looking at me while I'm speaking.
So excited.
Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, or ACB, I would like to congratulate the Crocodiles Philippines for organizing this very important event. The ACB recognizes that human-wildlife conflict is a serious concern, which, if not prevented, can be another driver for biodiversity loss in the ASEAN region. Human-wildlife conflict has been described by researchers as a serious environmental challenge for human society and is therefore a central issue in wildlife management due to its increasing severity and complex nature. The Collaborative Partnership on Sustainable Wildlife Management of the CBD, or the Convention on Biological Diversity, explains that human-wildlife conflict occurs when the needs of wildlife encroach on those of human populations, or the needs of human populations encroach upon those of wildlife. More broadly, interactions between wildlife and humans can cause damage or cost to both, and lead to conflicts between different groups of people over wildlife and how it should be managed. The severity of human-wildlife conflict has been attributed to several factors. These include expansion of human activities into wildlife habitats, recovery and expansion of a few wildlife populations, and large-scale environmental changes, including those due to climate change. All these forces, the displacement of both people and animals from their homes and habitats. Because of these factors, human-wildlife conflict has reached urban and suburban areas, involving wildlife species that have a history of coexistence with humans or the ability to survive human-dominated environment. In the past, it was only considered a rural or agricultural problem of communities living near forests, but now it's considered an issue as well in urban areas and suburban areas. Unmitigated conflicts would lead to decreased local support for conservation and then retaliatory killing of wildlife species, thus threatening the long-term survival of wildlife species. Studies have shown that low levels of wildlife population tend to be associated with areas that show a high degree of conflict between humans and wildlife. According to the Convention on Biological Diversity and its partners, no single approach is adequate to address human-wildlife conflicts. Clear policy is designed through a joint and inclusive approach that involves all stakeholders, while often resource-intensive in terms of time and effort, are likely to be the best in designing transparent and workable strategies to prevent, reduce, and manage human-wildlife conflicts. Conflict management should thus be an adaptive process. To make more informed and cost-effective decisions, stakeholders, including affected communities, must consider collection and analysis of information, joint communication of findings to locals, collective setting of objectives, choice and implementation of conflict management approaches, informed monitoring and evaluation of management decisions and processes leading to adjustments where needed. Presently, practical solutions that are being carried out in various countries usually involve preventing wildlife from entering fields or villages. In Malaysia, elephants are among the wild animals that are in conflict with people due to their shared landscape. And some of the methods that they employed by the locals include, to mitigate the conflict, are transportation to elephants and even electric fencing systems. Another way being advocated to mitigate human-wildlife conflict is land use planning, to ensure that both humans and animals have the space they need. This is where the protected areas come in. The ASEAN Center for Biodiversity and the ASEAN member states have a flagship program that applies land use planning. This is the establishment of ASEAN Heritage Parks, a network of protected areas of high conservation importance, preserving a total and complete spectrum of representative ecosystems of the ASEAN region. These protected areas also serve as buffer zones where our wildlife can thrive and therefore do away with initiating conflict with humans. So at the moment, we have 44 registered ASEAN heritage parks. The ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, through our small grants program with the German bank, KfW, and the Biodiversity Conservation and Management of Protected Areas in the ASEAN, or the BCAM project, with the European Union, has conducted a series of workshops with protected area managers and officers to keep them updated with the latest rules, tools, and mechanisms, and ultimately strengthen the network and build their capacity in areas. I was lucky to catch the presentation of Dr. Graham Webb earlier, and I've seen how there's a shift in paradigm now in the protection of our crocodiles. This is something that I have recognized even before I came into the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. As head of the Biodiversity Management Bureau, I'd like to say hello to my successor, Chrisma, who's also here, and is continuing some of these initiatives that we've had before in trying to promote crocodile conservation through promoting sustainable crocodile enterprises. And what policies have always been challenging because we're also covered by global policies through the CITES. And even in the Convention International Trade of Endangered Species, it has been difficult to push for harvesting of crocodiles, even in a sustainable manner. As also mentioned by Dr. Webb earlier, we also have the animal welfare groups that we need to address the issues of the animal welfare groups. But in the end, the communities are only able to help us protect if they realize the benefit of what they are protecting. And we need researchers to be able to determine thresholds. How many can be harvested so that to make sure that the crocodile population in the wild still is viable. So sometimes these are sometimes the barriers for us when we try to defend certain policies in governments, both at the national and even at the regional level. And at the global level, there's always a question of thresholds. So how much can we harvest, and how much of the population should we leave behind, so that the integrity of the ecosystem remains intact. At the moment, aside from supporting ASEAN heritage parks, which provides, protected areas are always an effective tool for conserving wild animals, including crocodiles in the wild. But at the moment, the shift in paradigm, we're also now supporting, through our projects and programs, mainstreaming biodiversity into enterprise. And we are supporting biodiversity-based products in communities around protected areas. This is also a way of trying to move the communities from solely being dependent on the resources within the national parks. This is something that we are supporting to determine if the communities, what are the traditional livelihoods that the communities are having. Some of the communities have, as shown earlier, have already been dependent on eggs, on crocodiles for a while. These are some of the traditional livelihoods. But because the populations have been depleted for a long time, certain policies have already have become very regulatory. But then, to a point, but if you are not able to enforce these policies, the tendency is that there will be more poaching. And the communities will not be able to realize that protection can really work for them. So we are now looking at biodiversity-based and biodiversity-friendly, community-based livelihoods includes as well, aside from just solely protection and enforcement within our traditional, within our ASEAN heritage parks. This is something that we want to work on within the ASEAN member states, and starting from our ASEAN heritage parks. In a lot of our ASEAN heritage parks and protected areas, including in the Philippines and in Thailand, for example, in Thailand's Guiburi National Park, there are conflict resolution committees comprised of local stakeholders, including affected communities, wildlife management authorities, local NGOs, and community-based organizations and relevant private sector players. Such as tour operators, because there's no one solution to addressing this challenge. We can allow sustainable use, but we should also have alternative enterprises, such as for tourism development, that we can use also for protecting the crocodiles in their natural habitat. A study of this participatory approach in the Guiburi National Park showed that the need of these committees to be legally mandated. To quote the study, this is vital in terms of sustainability of the institutional body itself and of being linked to the management planning process to ensure adequate budgetary flow for optimal conflict mitigation. And speaking of Thailand, a few years ago, we also supported, in the ASEAN, it's always very good to work with each other. In Bangkok, when Thailand proposed for downgrading of the crocodiles in Thailand, so that this can be in Appendix 2, we try to support Thailand in that issue, because in the ASEAN we cannot work by ourselves. It is always better to work as a group, and most of the time we have the same issues that are that we encounter in the ASEAN member states. And so I heard that, because I was in that meeting when Thailand proposed for this, and eventually it led to certain crocodile industries that were able to get certification from CITES. And also from the Philippines, we were able to get that certification as well. So it's if we work together, it's easy to be able to. If we have these common positions, it's easier to be able to get what we want at the global level. So crocodile conservation entails collaboration with the local communities. That's already given. This was presented earlier. But it also needs regional cooperation as well among countries. It is always important to share the lessons that we learn from each of the countries and from the communities within our countries, and from the protected area managers that also encounter problems with their crocodile population. We're also thinking of eventually gathering all the business and enterprises that depend on biodiversity and see how we can work with them so that we can make their industries more sustainable. It is time really to engage the private sector for all of these biodiversity-based industries. It is not clear sometimes, as was mentioned by Dr. Webb, the ones that are buying the products don't really realize how much the biodiversity is contributing to the product that they are wearing or that they are using. And that there are communities that should be benefiting from the use of these products. So it's important that we work together on this, especially for the countries in the ASEAN. So in short, first we need to identify the real concerns. It's important that we also have the concerned parties to seek support among each other. And then third, to define these issues that require immediate attention. Fourth is to propose alternative actions to address the issues that we are encountering, especially on human-wildlife conflict. Fifth is to evaluate these consequences so that we can come up with all of these alternative actions. As I mentioned, there is no single solution. We need to engage the private sector now. And there are several private sector that we can, those that depend directly on the resource, and then those that are indirectly dependent on the resource, like the tourism industry, who can use the crocodile as an attraction among others. And then, of course, those that don't realize that certain ecosystem services depend on the presence of the crocodile, like aquaculture, for example. Dr. Alcala has been Dr. Alcala has been telling us, if you have a tilapia can actually thrive better if they are bred in an area where crocodiles are still present. In one mining area that I visited, when they tried to rehabilitate their water area, they realized that the final element that they needed to rehabilitate their aquacultural area are the presence of crocodiles. So they had to reintroduce the crocodiles in their water system so that they can produce the fisheries that they needed to produce. So among all of these, we should be able to choose our options that are best for the situation that we are in. And then, of course, we need to be able to implement these options together with all the stakeholders that have contributed to this concept, including government, and as I mentioned, the academe for research is very important, and then the private sector. And then last but not the least, we need to evaluate our efforts and then provide feedback so that we can continue improving these measures that we have selected to implement. So now, as we try to mitigate human-wildlife conflicts in the ASEAN region, let us not forget the other battles that we need to win in order to emerge victorious in the war against biodiversity loss. These other battles include illegal wildlife trade. We should still need to address that because that all illegal trade always affects a legitimate industry. In as much as we want to support a legitimate wildlife industry, if we have illegal trade, then these are leakages that will affect the legitimate industry. So we need to address illegal wildlife trade as well. Invasive alien species is also something that we need to address, especially in island ecosystems, and many others, all of which I would want to talk more about invasive alien species, but Dr. C is here, so I'm sure he has a lot to share. Emerson. And many others, all of which are interconnected and in the web of life that we call biodiversity. So I hope I was able to share whatever I can share. I'm sorry, I was not able to provide the photos, but I'm welcome to discuss with all of you after this and see how the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity can support more of these kinds of initiatives, and so we can also connect the researchers with the industry, with policy, especially across the countries in the ASEAN region. So thank you very much, and congratulations.